Ancient Egypt History, a history project presented by Miles Sharon, Jack Bell, and Nathan John. So this is an ancient Egyptian map showing all the cities of ancient Egypt, the Nile River.
How Egypt began. Over time, small villages would begin to merge. These small villages formed small kingdoms. Each kingdom was ruled by a king. Weak kingdoms would be taken over by bigger and stronger kingdoms. By the time of 4000 BCE, Egyptians were made up of two large kingdoms, Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt. King Narmer was a crucial part in Egypt's creation and development.
King Narmer.
3100 BCE, he held his armies from the valley north into the delta. He conquered Lower Egypt and married one of the lower kingdom's princesses.
So Nathan, so a big question is, who was King Narmer, right? Yeah, and who was King Narmer?
He was the first king to rule over all of Egypt.
A united upper and lower.
Narmer established a new capital at Memphis. This later became the center of government and culture along the Nile River. Narmer's kingdom lasted long after his death. His family created a dynasty. When one dynasty died out, another took its place. You might ask, how was Egypt separated into different time periods? Well, from about 3100 BCE to 332 BCE, about 30 dynasties ruled Egypt. These dynasties are organized into three time periods: the Old Kingdom, the Middle Kingdom, and the New Kingdom.
Okay, hold up. Miles, what?
My lunchbox.
Okay, come get it.
Sorry to disturb.
Okay, it's okay. Will you put the thing back in the door where it's just push to but not shut? The wedge.
Yeah.
Hang on. Make sure so that if somebody comes, they can hear it. All right, sorry. All right, go ahead.
Hieroglyphics and papyrus. You might be wondering how the Egyptians recorded information. Well, just like in Mesopotamia, Egypt developed their own writing system. At first, Egyptian writing was used by drawing picture symbols that showed objects or ideas. It was later that the Egyptians developed symbols to represent sound. Egyptian writing was called hieroglyphics. Only a few Egyptians could read and write hieroglyphs. There were people in Egypt called scribes. Scribes could read and write hieroglyphs. These scribes would copy documents. And this is a model, and it says, Mr. P's class is the best.
How did y'all find that?
Translate.
Yeah. Yep. And then you freehanded it?
Well, yes, we
Actually, no, I did it.
he
Awesome.
did all the hieroglyphs.
Okay, awesome.
The Old Kingdom. The Old Kingdom lasted from 2650 BCE to 2100 BCE and encompasses the 3rd through 6th dynasties. The second ruler of the 3rd dynasty, Djoser, was the first ruler to control all of Egypt. While he was ruler, Egypt became very prosperous, and irrigation was introduced. The population grew very fast, and Egypt was able to trade a lot.
Can I ask a question, Miles? So the Old Kingdom was the beginning era of the United Egypt, right? of lower and upper, lower.
Yeah, so first
And
king, yeah.
so the population grew a lot because of that irrigation, the use of irrigation, right? Okay, awesome.
And Egypt was able to trade a lot. Most of the Egyptian pyramids were built during the Old Kingdom. While edging towards the end of the 6th dynasty, the Nile failed to flood, and famine induced. As a result, the Old Kingdom fell into chaos of the First Intermediate Period.
Okay, so there's some very important information. Again, during the Old Kingdom, early on in a united Egypt, the population flourished because of irrigation ability, because the more you can make crops, the more your population will grow, right? And then it fell into chaos because
The Nile fell the
they didn't have the flooding they needed every year, and then they didn't have the fertile crops and famine. That's important stuff to write down, guys.
Okay, pharaohs. They also appointed a pharaoh or king/queen, making them a monarchy. The pharaohs were also both the political and religious leader, therefore making them a theocracy. The first pharaoh is believed to be King Narmer, also called Menes. They believed in many gods, and they based their lives around these gods. The embalming process. The people of Egypt thought that the afterlife was physical. So to make sure that they would not rot after they die, they made a process of embalming. Before the process of embalming began, priests and priestesses would remove the organs from the body. Then they would cover the body with a salt called natron. This dried up the remaining waters in the corpse. This caused the body to shrink. After this, they would fill the body with the burial spices and tightly cover the body with strips of linen, commonly known as a mummy.
The Middle Kingdom. Around 2200 BCE, the ruling pharaohs in Memphis began to weaken. Nobles fought for control of Egypt. For over 200 years, Egypt was in chaos, as disorder and violence swept across the land. Finally, a new dynasty of pharaohs came to power. They made a new capital, south of the original, called Thebes. These new pharaohs began a period of peace and order called the Middle Kingdom. The Middle Kingdom was also known as the Golden Age. It was a period of growth in territory and wealth for the ancient Egyptians, but this was bound to end. Around 400 years later, nobles started challenging the pharaohs for their power. Civil war divided Egypt, and as they were weakened by conflict across the region, they were invaded and taken over by the Hyksos. The Hyksos used powerful tactics of warfare unknown to the ancient Egyptians. The Hyksos rode in horse-drawn chariots and fought with sturdy weapons, made of iron and bronze. Because of this, the Hyksos overwhelmed the Egyptian soldiers and took control of the land. For over 100 years, the Hyksos ruled over Egypt. But the Egyptian people had a plan to overthrow the Hyksos. The Egyptians learned how to steer horse-drawn chariots and how to use the Hyksos as weapons. Around 1550 BCE, an Egyptian prince named Ahmose formed an army and overthrew the Hyksos and drove them out of Egypt.
The pyramids. The pyramids were built to serve as tombs for the pharaohs, and although it is still a mystery, people believe that the pyramids were built by thousands of workers and took between 15 to 30 years. You may be wondering why did they do this for one structure for the pharaoh? Well, people did this because they believed that the pharaohs were the son of Re. Re, the son of God. In Egypt, they also believed that they would have an afterlife that would be physical.
So that's why they were tied to the mythology, and that's why they built the pyramids, right?
And then we have
A pyramid.
pyramid model. Yes.
And most of the pyramid building and all of this was in the Middle Kingdom.
Yeah.
Correct, guys?
So actual pyramid took 15 to 30 years. This took 15 to 30 minutes.
So,
But most of the pyramids were built during the Middle Kingdom. And then the New Kingdom.
Egypt, New Kingdom. Egypt also gained more land and were at their highest point of power because Egypt was no longer isolated. They were able to benefit from the spread of goods, ideas, and cultures that were within their empire. The New Kingdom went through the 18th to the 20th dynasties. Akhenaten changed Egyptian religion by rejecting the pantheon of Egyptian gods and introducing the worship of Aten, the god of the sun. In the 19th dynasty, Ramses II, also all of his descendants, built spectacular buildings during this age. The Nile River. The creation of ancient Egypt centered around the Nile. The Nile is a river and it provided fertile land for farming to the Egyptians. Because of the Nile, the people settled there and created one of the first civilizations. The Nile would also flood and silt would come up to the surface. This helped Egyptian farming. The Nile flowed north, emptying into the Mediterranean Sea.
Agriculture. Egyptians were also able to grow a food surplus. They were able to do this because they were protected by the desert around them, and they were not being invaded, and the food was not being stolen. They also were able to do this because of the fertile land that the Nile provided. This helped people not have to spend too much time on farming. This opened up the roles of people like artisans, merchants, and traders. More goods were able to become available. This meant that more villages along the Nile could trade. Ancient Egyptians were able to trade to faraway places. Traders also learned about the ways and lives and governments of other cities. As trade increased, the need for a government that was organized became higher. A government was needed for a society, and a government was also needed to settle arguments over land.
this is the Shadu. And the Shadu was used to irrigate the water. I mean the plant.
Use the mic.
And the, oh yeah.
This is the Shadu, and the Shadu was used to irrigate the soil to make it more fertile. And
Well, and to give water to the
Yeah.
crops. They literally got the water out of the Nile and were able to bring it over to the crops.
yes, and it has a very cool name. Shadu. Okay, decline and legacy of ancient Egypt. Ancient Egypt's decline accelerated rapidly after about 1075 BCE, when Dynasty XX ended. Bitter struggles for power by priests and nobles broke the country into small states. Egypt lost a lot of its territory, and its weakness and lack of power attracted a series of invasions. During the next 750 years, 10 dynasties ruled Egypt. Most of the dynasties weren't Egyptian dynasties. Most of them were formed by Nubian, Assyrian, and Persian rulers. By this time, Egypt was conquered for the second time, and this was the fall of ancient Egypt, as it would be a long time until the Egyptians ruled Egypt again. Ancient Egypt fell, but its legacy lives on in its writings, incredible buildings, and monuments. And ideas.
Citations.
All righty.
You guys are gonna want to read that because we're definitely gonna put that on the test.
Let's give him a hand.
Wait,